So this morning could be a really good morning, or I could leave here and be in trouble. I'm hoping to not leave here and be in trouble. One person in particular knows why I'm prefacing this morning's message in that way. We've been studying the book of Nehemiah. We're up into chapter 4 right now, and we've kind of walking through Nehemiah and leadership as he's an amazing leader, and kind of walking through his life and the life of the Jewish people at this time period. But this morning, I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about my childhood. Now, I did this. I had actually written most of my message before my dad came and visited us, and so everything before, I wrote this portion of the message anyways before he showed up. So this has nothing to do with his visit up until this point. So just kind of letting you all know that at the beginning. And I know that this could be dangerous because he could go back and tell my brothers and family members that I talk about them in service sometimes, which I do. And I always, 98% of the time, say positive, great, wonderful things about them and encouraging things. And because he's here, I don't have to worry about gossiping about him or anything like that. So I'm safe, I think, in all of the areas. But looking back on my childhood, I really have started to understand why I am the way that I am. Why I do the things that I do. And I'm sure some of you probably can identify that when you're looking back on your childhood and now you're an adult and thinking, well, that's why I do that thing, or that's why I kind of are inclined to think in that way. My personality type, if you haven't realized this already, is I'm a fixer. I'm geared and drawn towards fixing things, whether it's problems or there's an actual thing that physically needs to be fixed. I'm just drawn towards that. I enjoy fixing things. During my childhood, and actually to this day, my dad was and has been a teacher. He taught in a private school, Christian private school, for a number of years. Moved on to public school. Now he's teaching at Eastern Nazarene College and at Quincy College, kind of working his way up the ladder there. I guess someday, maybe down the road, he'll be superintendent of Massachusetts school systems or something. I don't know. But because he's been a teacher, he's had the ability and the luxury of having summers off. And when I was growing up, because I was obviously as a kid, kids have summers off. We got to spend a lot of time with Dad, and my mom worked part-time, and so we got to spend a lot of time together as family. This picture is actually taken on a train. This picture was taken in the Boston Garden when it was still there. My cousin had taken us to see something on ice, and we got swords. I don't know what it was. But anyways, so my dad had summers off, and we got to spend a lot of that with him. And we all know that summer can be tough for kids. It was a challenging summer, I think, for our family because Emily, Kyle, and Luke were just going 1,000 miles a minute, going all over the place. We're going here, there, and everywhere. So we had a very, very busy summer. But we know that summers can be tough. And my dad, I really think, did a great job at making sure that we had good summers. We went to a lot of different places. We did things, went camping, things of that nature. We had a lot of fun spending time with him. However, of course, there's always a however, right? So, however, growing up as a kid and even as a teen, and actually still to this day, but I can remember every summer my dad had a project. Every single summer there was a project. So, at the end of the school year, he would start, dare I use the word scheming, as to what I could do this summer for a project. Now, these projects weren't, things he just kind of dreamed up, what could I do? These were real household projects that he had to do. And looking back at this, he, over the course of, 10, 12 years, had renovated every single room in the house that I grew up in. I mean, in every room. So there is probably 10, 12 rooms or so. And he renovated every single one of them and updated them and stuff like that. However, there was one time in particular that I remember, one of these summer projects where my uncle was up visiting from Arizona, I think it was, where he was living at the time. I think they're still there to this day. And my dad was renovating one of the most difficult rooms in the entire house to do, which is the kitchen. It's a really tough room to renovate because it's one of the most used rooms in the entire house. I mean, it's where you cook, it's where you have all your food, it's where you wash your dishes. So it's really tough to renovate a kitchen. And so my uncle was helping my dad and I at the time. I remember being old enough and kind of getting thrown into the mix where I could go help out and go to Home Depot and help him out and do things and hold sheetrock up. Probably the only reason why I was there to help is so that I could be a helper to hold the sheetrock up. And so my uncle thought he knew what to do. His way was the right way. His way was the best way to go. And my dad had already kind of planned out how he was going to do things. And from my perspective, and of course, from my perspective, I was only 12. I don't even remember how old I was, but I know I wasn't very old. And I could see this going back and forth of my dad knowing how to do things and my uncle saying, well, this is how it should be done. And this dilemma that was created. And so I could tell my dad was getting frustrated, getting irritated, and it looked like, from my perspective, at one point he just wanted to stop. He just wanted to give up and say, forget it. I'm done. I'm done. This is where we find Nehemiah and the Jews in this time period where they're at in Nehemiah chapter 4. So if you have your Bibles with you, would you open up to Nehemiah chapter 4? We're going to read the entire passage. And would you stand with me in honor of God's word as we read from Nehemiah chapter 4. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, "What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are?" Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "This is awesome. What they are building, even a fox climbing on it, it would break down on their wall of stones. Hear us, O God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder and a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders." So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half of its height, for the people worked with all of their heart. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs in the Jerusalem walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Meanwhile, the people of Judah said, "The strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall." Also our enemies said, "Before they know it or see us, they will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to their work." Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. Therefore I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families, with their swords and spears and bows. And after I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, "Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plots and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to our own work. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers posted themselves behind the people of Judah, who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. Each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are wildly separated from each other along the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us. So we continued the work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn till the stars came out. At that time I said to the people, have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night, so they can serve as guards by night and as workers by day. Neither I nor my brothers, nor my men, nor the guards with me took off our clothes. Each had his weapon, even when he went for water. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Now, for those of you who have been with us for the last few weeks, we know that Nehemiah has had to go through a lot of difficult, tough situations. He's already faced a lot of obstacles. He's already faced oppression, ridicule, heartache. And now he has his people finally working for him. The people are excited. They're working. They're doing the work. And I remember last week when we looked at Nehemiah and how he shared with great enthusiasm and excitement about what God had done for him and through him and with him. And how he prayed and asked God's help, and how God, through the relationship that Nehemiah had with the king, he was able to go off to the land of his people, to Jerusalem, got supplies to build and fortify the walls of the city. He did this to help bring about some stability for his people. Through building the walls of the city, they were able to keep intruders out. They were able to feel safe. They were able to really become a nation once again. They were able to become a real people. And what were the people's response to this? When he came and he had this great passion, this great mission of what God had really laid on his heart and what he was going to do. Well, these people remembered they were tired. They were oppressed. They were probably really, really upset about what had happened, about where they were. They're probably really hungry too. They probably didn't have the greatest houses or homes. And their answer easily could have been, we're just too discouraged. We're tired. We just can't do it. Fill in the blank. We're just too whatever. Whatever reason that you can come up with. But because they heard the message of God from Nehemiah and that God was going to be with them, they said, let's start building. Let's start building. So they began to build. They began to build, and they began to do the work of God. Of course, like we talked about last week, and still in this story, as they began to build, began to do the work, obstacles came up. Obstacles came up, adversity came up, adversaries came up, they always seem to pop up. And of course, again, their nemesis Sanballat and his pals came out and immediately started to mock them. Now, it's interesting here that Sanballat didn't send other people to go do this for him. He didn't say, well, these Jews are really getting me frustrated. I'm going to send a few different other people to go make fun and mock them for me. He got so frustrated, so angry, so furious, he personally went out to go mock the Jews, to mock Nehemiah. I've tried to think of a situation that I've been in where I've had someone intentionally go out and mock me for whatever reason. Either I was doing God's work, or I was just kind of at the grocery store. Doing whatever throughout the day. And I this week came across a situation that I was in where I was just mocked and ridiculed. How many of you have been to the fair? That's here in Essex Junction. Okay, so Kyle's been. We went. So shoot your hand up real high. Have you been to the fair this week? Okay, I know you went to the fair this week. I saw pictures on Facebook. So Kyle and I went to the fair. I took Kyle. We had a lot of fun, and we started walking around. And we're walking and looking at all the booths that you could buy a ridiculous amount of food from, the rides you could go on, and we finally came in what seemed to be kind of one of the back rows. This guy making all this noise and just, stuff like that. And I'm like, what is going on? And so there's this sandwich board that's out there, and it says, don't go near this, display if you don't want to get made fun of, or something to that effect. And so I look up, and there's this guy sitting on this perch, and he's making fun of people as they walk by, like really ridiculing them and making fun of them. And so Kyle and I walked by, and I kind of swung like kind of out like this, so that we didn't go right past him because I didn't want the guy making fun of Kyle or me and stuff. So we kind of went around, and this group of teens went across, and so this guy started making fun of this girl's hair and whatever, and they're all giggling and stuff. And so these two kids, it was great. So these two kids, they couldn't have been any older than Kyle's age, maybe 9 or 10 maybe, or something like that. So they pay the money to go up and throw baseballs at these two targets. And if you hit the target, the clown goes into the dunk tank, and you soak the clown, the clown that makes fun of you and stuff. And so this guy's just going on, and these two little kids, and no one thinks they're actually going to do it. And so he's not even paying attention to them. So he's mocking people that are just walking by, and all of a sudden this little kid, he was little, he was smaller than Kyle. He takes this ball and he throws it, and it's kind of really slow, and it doesn't even hit the target. It just kind of glazes the target, and it hits it hard enough where the guy right in the water. And that was the end of the mocking. It was really, really cool. And now everyone around him was screaming and shouting, lifting this kid on their shoulders and that's so great. They knocked the clown down into the water and stuff. But this is kind of where they were. The Jews were in this place where Sanballat was just ridiculing and mocking and making fun of them and really putting them down and putting down Nehemiah and just kind of going at them with all guns blazing. He's ready, he's shooting off anything he could think of to make fun of them. And he was saying it to not just Nehemiah, but everyone else who was around them, to Nehemiah's friends, but maybe family members, who his followers, whoever knows who else was there. And those who said yes to building the wall, he's making fun of them. And then Sanballat continues his rant by pointing out that there's so much trash, there's so much junk everywhere. And I don't know about you, but when I have watched the History Channel, and sometimes they show, scenes from World War I or World War II, and they show Europe and just rubble everywhere, I can only imagine that it looks something similar to this. Walls down, houses destroyed, buildings in ruins, and they start to make fun of them and suggest that what they are doing is completely worthless. That even if this little fox jumped on top of the wall, boom, it'd fall down. I mean, how demoralizing is that? How frustrating is that for you to hear this? So in this situation, again, like I said a few weeks ago, and even last week, we have Nehemiah and the people faced with persecution, faced with an obstacle. So what did they do? What did Nehemiah do? Well, he did 3 very important things that we're going to talk about very briefly. I don't know about you, but when I get into a situation where someone's mocking me or ridiculing me, I really wish my first answer was to do what Nehemiah did. I really do. But it's not. My first thought is, how can I make this person stop and get back at them? Or how can I turn this around where I'm not getting made fun of, but I'm kind of putting it back onto them? And I've been really convicted this week when I've been going through this text to do what Nehemiah did first. His first reaction wasn't to go to war. He probably could have scrounged up people to go to war. His first reaction wasn't to send spies out to go kill Sanballat in his sleep. His first reaction wasn't to find the closest stone he could find and chuck it at Sanballat, which is, probably what I would have done and seemingly what my kids do to each other. But his first reaction wasn't to cut and run. His first reaction, the first thing that he did was he prayed. His first reaction was to pray. Now, we really shouldn't be surprised by all this. This shouldn't come as a shock to us that Nehemiah prayed. The first thing that he does is pray. And that's the first thing that he does to everything up until this point is he prays. When Nehemiah was faced with his heartache when he was in Susa, when we talked about his relationship to the king, he prayed before he talked to the king. He prayed. In Numbers chapter 2, when he sets watch and equips his workers, he prays. And some of those workers got tools and went up on the wall. Nehemiah prayed. Nehemiah prayed. The second thing that he did was he got his people ready. He made sure that he got his people some weapons, made sure that he got his people some tools. And when the ones who were done working, they picked up weapons, made sure that they were there so they could be responsible for the people that were working, had this exchange going on. He got them ready. Now, one of the reasons why they needed to have weapons is because Sanballat assembled the Samaritans, who were enemies of the Jews. And even if we read through the New Testament, we know that there's a lot of tension between Samaritans and Jews. And he got the Samaritans to help the oppression of the building of the walls. They were there to discourage the Jews. Now, it's highly unlikely, although anything's possible, but it's highly unlikely he assembled this army to actually go to war, to go physically kill the Jews and try to wipe them out, or at least kill as many of them as they could so that they couldn't build the wall. It's very unlikely that he assembled an army or got an army there to actually do this. Because if he did this, he would have been going against what the king had ordered, because remember, the king had ordered for Nehemiah to have all these provisions and to go and build the walls back up. If Sanballat had decided he was going to go to actual war with the Jews, he would have been going against the king and therefore would have had real issues with the king at that time. So it's likely, very likely actually, that he assembled this army for a fear tactic, for a scare tactic, to try to show the Jews that, hey, we've got this massive army, we're going to wipe you out if you don't stop. And then hopefully that they would have just stopped. But he didn't. Sanballat didn't do this. He didn't go to war, he just had them there to make sure that maybe they could stop him through fear. However, Nehemiah knew that his people needed to feel safe. I don't know about you, but any time that I'm doing a project, especially up on a ladder, actually, I'll share with you a quick story that just came to mind. When I was a teenager, I did something really dumb. I only did one thing dumb when I was a teenager. And this is the only thing that I did dumb when I was a teenager. As my dad jokes and laughs at me, because I say that in jest. I did a lot of not too bright things when I was a teenager. One of the things that I did was, my personality, like I share with you, my personality type is a fixer. So I got frustrated when I was watching TV, and we didn't have cable when I was growing up, and so the picture wasn't coming in, and our antenna was up on top of our 2-story house. And so I said, you know what? I'm sick of this. I'm going to go up on the roof and fix it. So I followed the line from the TV into the basement, up the side of the house, up to the antenna. I said, I'm just going to go up. I'm going to fix it. So I got out, and I wasn't afraid of heights or anything. So I got out the extension ladder, put up on the side of the house, and I was smart, I thought. I got a car mat, so I wasn't going to be sitting on the hot, shingles, which I think was a smart idea, right? I mean, it's kind of smart. So I went up and I sat there and I started to jiggle it and try to fix it. Well, of course, I didn't bring a TV with me, so I have no idea if what I was doing was actually helping or hurting. And so I'm up there, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I've got to get down to fix this thing. Well, only problem was I didn't really think of how I was going to get down without having the ladder slip and slide from one side to the other. And I didn't ask anyone to come hold the ladder for me or to help me. I didn't know where anybody else was. They were either in the house or out shopping or doing something. I didn't know where anybody else was. So I'm there up on the roof, and I am freaking out. I'm panicking. Now, I don't usually freak out or panic. I mean, Susan can probably, attest to that. I'm pretty cool when it comes to difficult situations. I was really freaking out. I eventually started yelling and screaming like a little girl, and someone came out, maybe my dad or mom came out, and I remember my mom standing there and saying, "Can you get down?" And I said, "No, I can't get down. I don't know how to get down." And so I eventually had the ladder, and I pushed it over to where the gutter was and prayed that the gutter would hold the ladder going sideways. So I swung myself over and climbed down. I almost had to have the fire department come. But I didn't have anyone helping. But I needed to feel, I should have had someone helping me so that I could feel safe. I should have had a few people there to make sure that I was safe doing the work. Or attempting to anyways. And so Nehemiah made sure, he realized that the people needed to feel safe to be able to continue the building project. So he wanted to make sure that they were safe. And the third thing that he did was he realized that, and I'm sure you probably realize this too, is when you're doing something, you're getting insults thrown at you, you're probably getting frustrated yourself and kind of depressed and not feeling very happy. And so he realized that they're probably feeling upset. They're probably feeling depressed and probably getting down on themselves and feeling defeated in a way. And so he realizes he needs to do something about this. So Nehemiah assembles the people as a whole by family. And I don't know about you, but when I'm with family, it makes me feel better. I know that if I'm stressed out during the day and Susan comes home, even though it probably means we're going to have to be doing a lot of different things for our family, I feel better. It just makes me feel calmer. That's just how I am. It makes me feel better to be around family. And so Nehemiah realizes this and makes sure he puts people in family, puts them into space. He wants to kind of show them strength, show other people strength, so he kind of organizes people in a certain way for that. And gathers people with their weapons, and he addresses them and says this: God will fight for us. God will fight for us. And now we've heard Nehemiah say something very similar last week when we were talking about him and how he talked to the people. We saw in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 20, Sanballat had just gotten done mocking and throwing insults at Nehemiah. Seems like that's all he does. And Nehemiah begins to share the plan that God has for his life and the plan for his people. And he says to the people, God will give us success. He will do this. And here we again see Nehemiah having confidence and having faith in God by saying to the people that, and really anyone listening, to which I would love to think that Sanballat was nearby when he says this, that the God of heaven will fight for us. And with this, hearing this, the people get back to work, knowing that God will fight for them. They realized that if it came down to it, they knew that they would really probably physically be doing a lot of the fighting, but that God would have their back and that he would be with them no matter what. And he is with them no matter what. We need to have the faith and trust in God that he will be there for us, that he will fight for us no matter what. And we know this because of what Christ did on the cross. We know because of what Christ did on the cross. Not just for some of us, but for all people. And as we partake together in a moment in sharing communion together, I pray that we might consider that God will fight for us and that he will be with us. And that's a promise that we have. Would you pray with me this morning? God, I pray this morning that we might really hear the words of Nehemiah. And when he spoke to the people there and proclaimed to them and gave them confidence and faith that you will always be there, ready to fight for us, ready to be with us. And God, I pray that that might really resonate with us this morning somehow. That we'll know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are there with us, and that you will never leave us or forsake us. So God, may that be our prayer and testimony this morning. And this week, and as we go throughout our week, may we be reminded that you will be there, and that you love us more than anything in this world. God, as we partake in Holy Communion together in a moment, I pray that this might be a blessed time. May your Spirit flow in this place. And may this not be something that we just do on the first Sunday of the month, but may this be a time in which we can really celebrate the death and life and the resurrection of your Son. We thank you and we love you. In Jesus' holy name, amen.